made the motion to go out of
Lisa.
executive session?
I
Lisa.
did.
Okay.
Lisa.
Okay, and it's 7 o'clock. We ready, Sean? All right, great. So we've already called this meeting to order. We just came out of executive session. Thanks for being here. And we are now going to move into our regular business. And so I guess the first thing is announcements. None? No announcements? I guess I do have a few.
I had
Okay.
put sorry,
Mike?
I had put a flyer at Mary Ann's spot about swimming lessons.
Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Oh. Okay. Well, I have an announcement about Gaunt Park Pool. To register for a class, please go to the pool during regular open hours, which are 1 to 7. And there are 4 levels of classes, including toddler swim from 12:20 to 1 o'clock. So, and then it also talks about the cost of lesson is $15 per class for non-residents, and village residents receive lessons at no cost. That's cool.
But I do have to check on something because I did have an email from the Community Foundation today about lessons and a potential grant for that. So
For non-residents?
For non-residents. So even if you're a non-resident, please go check at the pool. We'll have that straightened out in the next couple days.
Okay. The other thing is, each session is limited to 12 registrants. So if you or your child would like to have a class, better get registered.
So I guess, since we're talking about the pool, there is a Gaunt Park Pool Facebook page that was created by a resident.
Bob Cooper.
Yes. And you know, actually, yeah, I think at one of the block parties, he had mentioned that, you know, it's got a lot of members and it would be good to support. So I had actually made Patty and Sam admins of that page. But I'm thinking, Judy, if you would be willing to take on whatever we post to our village page and like putting that on the Gaunt Park Pool page, I'll make you an admin. I mean, in general, our, I guess our policy is that anything related to the village should go through the village Facebook page, but Bob made a pretty good argument that, you know, this page has a lot of, you know, people paying attention to it. So, if we could do that.
So pool related or not pool related, just?
Pool related.
Just pool related.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I will make you an admin, and if we could share these kinds of things, anything we, you know, pool related, we put on our Facebook page,
Yeah.
just share it there. He also mentioned that it could be a good opportunity when we do like the midnight swims and things to promote those better. And it actually does kind of speak to when we talk about promoting some of our other things. Facebook groups, this is a group, I'm sorry, not a page, you know, are a good way to get the word out. So I'm going to make you an admin, and if we could start doing that, that would be great.
So if someone has something, let's see, they're going to have a swim meet or something about the pool, or they have some cool photographs, should they send those to Judy?
Yeah.
Who would post them?
Sure. Yeah, just like whoever put the stuff up about Rob, that was really cool. Was that you?
It was not. I think it was Florence, actually.
Yeah, that was really neat, and I think you know, I think that that fits with our social media presence. So I wanted to also mention, if people haven't seen on our Facebook page, the mayor passed a proclamation to make June Yellow Springs Pride Month, and very excited about that. We also have a resolution that we'll be looking at tonight to highlight Pride Week in Yellow Springs. And as we've talked about on several occasions, given our values around being a welcoming community and highlighting diversity, I'm really happy to see that kind of thing being recognized by our mayor and hopefully by council. The other thing I wanted to mention is a little update about Cresco Labs. We haven't talked about Cresco in a while. I was invited to come up to Cresco earlier or last week, and one thing I discovered is they are at 50 employees. 20% of those employees are local residents, and an exciting piece of that is that many people that are working for Cresco have moved to the village. They also are looking at how they can more actively recruit locally. So I think that's really important. They understand that that's important to us as a community. And the other thing that's been important to us is the commitment to community service that they made when they came in. And so they sent me a list of things they're doing this week. Today, in fact, they were involved in relief activities related to the tornado activities, and they have about 15 of their employees that are passing out food and water. Later this week, they are helping with honeysuckle remediation, both with Agraria and also with Home Inc. So I was really happy to see that they're, meeting that commitment that they made early on. And they're also expanding big time. They expect to double their employees, so that would mean to 100 in the near future. And I saw the construction that they're doing around building out the plant. So this is great news for the village, and that was part of where we talked about. They have a new facility manager, Ari Greenwald, who really highlighted wanting to focus on getting more local folks employed at Cresco. So great news, really happy to see them being a good community partner.
And
Yes.
in the same vein as people who are hiring, as you will see in my manager's report later tonight, the Census Bureau is hiring. They have many full-time and part-time positions. A lot of the part-times are work from home. They want to hire people local to serve in the areas where they live. So it's relatively good pay. The jobs will run through the census next year. If you're interested in looking at what they have available, go to 2020census.gov/jobs and just click on the tab, and it will pull up all of the different jobs that they have in the different areas.
And I think to add on to that, through my, being part of the executive committee for Greene County Regional Planning, I learned that Yellow Springs is one of the, top 3 undercounted areas. And so we really need to do a better job. So if we could get somebody local involved in that census count, because as Patty highlights in her manager report, those counts make a huge difference in terms of getting grants and other things that can help support the activities for the village, so.
Yes, and I am serving on the Complete Count Committee right now, and Josue will be taking my spot when he comes in. So we will have a direct relationship with that Complete Count Committee. So it is really important that we get the high counts, because the federal dollars and the grants, all of those are very important, and they're based on those accurate counts.
All right,
So,
thanks.
and the good news is that college students are to be counted where they sleep most of the time. So if you're an Antioch student, you get counted in Yellow Springs. Because if you live here, you reside in a dorm, you sleep there most of the time, get counted in Yellow Springs.
All right, thanks. Any other announcements? Okay, so we've got the consent agenda. We have the minutes from our last meeting, as well as our special meeting where we had an executive session. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Yeah, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Review the agenda. Anything we need to add, change, move on the agenda?
I would like to add under new business a brief discussion about council supporting the H2 Ohio bill regarding clean water in Ohio.
Okay, great.
And I would like to add to new business just a really short discussion of emergency preparedness in the village.
Great. Good idea. Okay, all right, Mary Ann, petitions and communications?
Okay. We had a lot. We had 5 letters of support, which actually, I think all came in last week, in regards to Beatty Hughes Park, keeping it a park, from Kathy Adams, Erica Gouchon, Sharon Moeller, Katie Wright, and Laura Skidmore for the Mothers Out Front. We had a number of letters in support of Chief Carlson, Chris Wyatt, John Nieberding, Heather Livingston, Kate Hamilton, Catherine Hitchcock, Don Cooksley, and Eleanor Anderson. And we had 2 letters concerned with the chief's contract and waiting till the assessment is through. And then, as Brian mentioned, Mayor Canine submitted her proclamation for Pride Month.
All right, thanks, Mary Ann. Okay, let's move into legislation. And the first thing we have on the list is ordinance 2019-15. Judy, I think we can do that by title only.
Sure. This is repealing and replacing section 1064.02 rates, admissions, and season hours of chapter 1064 municipal swimming pool of part 10, streets, utilities, and public services of the codified ordinances of the village of Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Okay, Patty, do you want to?
Sure. You have several revised rate sheets in front of you. Option 1 is an across-the-board increase of the fees. So there is a dollar amount that Colleen feels that we need to increase this to, which we will incur a loss still on the pool. This will not make us even by any stretch. But the option 1 is across-the-board distribution for in-village and out-of-village users. Option 2 is a 40% increase to residents and a 60% increase to non-residents, because council had asked for different distribution scenarios. Option 3 is 30% increase to residents and 70% increase to non-residents. And option 4 is 100% increase to non-residents as far as that dollar amount, with no increase to residents. The 5th sheet that you have is simply a comparison of our rates versus other pools in the area. And the question was also asked as to the distribution of the users of the pool, whether they are in the village or out of the village, what percentage that is. There is not a formal count, that has not been tracked, but Sam's estimate, Samantha Stewart, who's our pool manager, has been for 2 or 3 years now, estimates that it is 60% in village and 40% outside the village. as far as the
Can you
distribution
say
of
that again?
users.
Sorry.
60% in the village, 40% outside the village,
Thank you.
as far as percentages of users at the pool.
Wow. Okay.
So Patty, am I correct that it's the first option that staff is recommending? I wasn't clear about that.
Right, the proposal one is the proposal that was brought to the last council meeting by Colleen. This was staff's original recommendation and is still staff's recommendation. However, the other percentages distribute the costs. You end up the same, it's like millage, you end up the same dollar amount, it just distributes it differently.
So can you say why staff recommends option one over the other options?
Because it evenly distributes the increase to in-village and out-of-village users. And especially since the distribution is so even for in-village and out-of-village users, 60/40.
Okay, well, I'll jump in. I didn't expect it to be, and it was hard to kind of like make an assessment without knowing what that in out of village was, because that wasn't in the packet. But hearing that it's 60/40, I'm going to advocate for either the option of the increase going to out of village completely, if not the 30-70 split. I mean, again, I appreciate that we offer, our pool to people that are not residents. I think that's great, that we have basically the only public pool in Greene County. But that being said, I feel pretty strongly, we'll have a chance for comments, that, it's important to think about, our taxpayer dollars that go to support like the upkeep of the public pool. And so anyway, so that would be where I would lean. Lisa, do you want to say something?
Canada, do you have anything, or, I don't know, no? I just don't, okay. I have one question before I give a perspective. So the program that changes the rates for people who have less means to pay, I can never remember
Swimming
the
for All.
name. Swimming for All.
Mhm.
Is that program accessible to both residents and non-residents?
I believe it is, yes. Johnny, do you know for sure? I
don't think it is.
It's only village residents? I can text Sam and find
So,
out.
yeah, I mean, to me, I'd like to know that, because I do, I do agree. I think it's important that we help the people who live in our community have access. And so, in that regard, I see the 70/30 or even the 100%. But then I also can imagine that there may be kids that, if we put 100% of it on non-residents, really might not have access to the pool. And so that troubles me a little bit. So I'm wondering if we're going to call it Swimming for All, what do we really mean by all? And, I mean, ideally, if we could put 100% on non-residents who had the ability to pay, and then expanded Swimming for All to include kids who couldn't from outside of the community. I know that's just adding more, more and more, but I'm trying to privilege the community members and kids who are lower income.
I have a question. Would it be possible for the municipalities or townships where it's probably mostly children come outside the village to kick in funds? I mean, would that be too?
You mean to make a donation to support the pool?
Yeah,
The township, I mean?
yeah, I mean, like if we knew, so many kids from Xenia are coming, or Fairborn, or the township.
Well, I mean, we can certainly ask that. So let me back up. Sam has answered that Swimming for All is only for village residents. As far as others making donations to the pool, yes, but I would imagine that they would want us to track the data very closely about where all of the users are coming from. And we just began discussing that today. And so I don't know how complicated that would be to do simply in village versus outside village, and then as opposed to outside but in Xenia, outside but in Jamestown, outside but in Cedarville. That might be a little too complicated to try to track. So,
It would be complicated and probably difficult to do right now, but it might be possible, given that none of those communities have pools, if there's some way that, hey, I live in Jamestown, I go to the Jamestown city, say, I want to go to the pool, and I get, Jamestown agrees to give some money.
Right.
don't
Well,
know.
I have a suggestion in that regard, which could be that one could reach out to Green Mountain Housing
Bless you.
and suggest that they offer, pool passes to the Yellow Springs Pool to Green Mountain Housing residents in Greene County, generally speaking. That way, those citizens are already identified as being low income and having some level of need, and the passes could flow through Green Mountain Housing instead of our employees trying to figure out, but do you have proof of income and that kind of thing. So that could possibly be.
Right.
and I do share the concern that Matt Kirk voiced at the last meeting of, this may, if we increase the out-of-resident costs too much, we may lose that revenue altogether, a certain percentage of that revenue, because they may stop coming to the pool.
Oh, I thought these models were based, the pricing was based on the same financial outcome based on percentage of coming from outside.
No,
No, it
it's
says it's
the
not.
same dollar amount, but the percentages of in-village and
Yeah.
out-of-village increases are different.
Okay.
Dan?
Yeah,
We need you to come to the mic.
sorry, I'm Dan Dixon. Only a government would think you could raise rates by 50% and not affect the customer set you have, right? You're going from 5 to 750. That's a huge difference. If you're in town, you're gonna come in, you're gonna go to the Yellow Springs Pool. If you're from out of town, you've got a carload of kids, you're gonna go to the local place with a reasonable price. And if you get, I agree with you, 40% from out of town is great. You're cutting the golden goose open, okay? You raise your price 50%, and all of a sudden, the golden goose is dead, and they'll go swim in Enid. They'll swim in Xenia. They'll swim somewhere else.
Except we do have comparisons that show we're still below all the other, not all the other, the few other like pools that are in the area.
Okay.
So even with those raises.
So you've
but-
done market research?
Yeah, that's in
Okay.
that's in the data, but.
We just haven't, we have, not- as has been the case in other things, the village has not taken a proactive approach to getting to like a level playing field with other entities.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when if you assume that your 60-40 split of attendees is going to stay the same after you raise the rates 50%, I think you're kidding yourself, really. I mean, you can say it's only $7, take a car full of kids and do that 3 days a week, and suddenly they will find another place to swim, and it will be 80-20.
Perhaps.
Okay. Megan?
Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I just have a question about how these are divvied up. So it looks like day passes, so the, let's see, 4 to 18 goes from 350 to 5 in the first one, then it goes to 450 in the second, so lower, and then 4. Then adults 5 to 750, then up to 8, and then up to 850, and then the last one, they're flat across. So they're treated like residents in the last one, but the
So-
other ones.
Yeah, so if you look up in the corner here,
Yeah.
on each one, the distribution is different. So on the first one, the increase across the board is the same percentage.
Well, how are you treating the day admissions, though? Are you treating them like residents or non-residents?
The day admissions are being treated as residents, I believe.
So I guess I'm just curious why the price goes up for the adult from $750 in the first scenario to $8, and then $850 in the second two scenarios, when it should be gearing more towards the non-resident section at the bottom. It just seems like there might be something. Do you see what I'm saying?
I can ask Colleen to give clarification on that, but my understanding is that they're being treated, well, I guess,
They're supposed to be treated like.
yeah. They're being treated as non-residents in this,
Except for the last.
except for the last page, and that doesn't make any sense, you're right.
Other comments from citizens?
Johnny's coming up.
Yeah, Johnny?
I want to address Mary Ann. The other places that don't have pools, you're talking about maybe the other towns and cities would be able to help out. What they're doing is they're putting in free splash pads. Xenia just created a big one by the train station. Fairborn's got one
Right.
over by the downtown area. So I don't know that they would try to help out for a village-owned swimming pool.
Yeah, and just as, you know, just to highlight for folks, I mean, so the other municipalities in the area that have pools are New Carlisle, it's about 30 minutes away, Tip City, more than 30 minutes away, Huber Heights, and then Springfield has their splash zone, which is a little bit different, that's more of a water park. So, other thoughts from council? So I guess I'll go back to, I'd like to propose that we, I mean, you know, we're experimenting. You know, we haven't raised rates in 10 years. That we start with making the increase for non-residents. I like Mary Ann's idea of exploring whether local municipalities would be willing to subsidize people that want to come to the pool. I mean, you know, we're the one pool in Greene County. We've invested a lot of money to keep our pool nice. And, you know, at the end of the day, our taxpayers pay for this service.
So you're suggesting that we do the 100% increase for non-residents?
Yep. I mean, I'm not opposed to, you know, some of the other distributions, but, I would like to see how that works. I mean, because right now, we are subsidizing the pool by a third, approximately, right? I
Yep.
mean,
From the taxpayers
from
who live in
taxpayer
Yellow Springs.
dollars.
I really like, yes, and I really liked Judy's idea about reaching out to Green Met.
Mhm.
Because I do have a concern, you know, that I'd like those kids to be able to be at the pool and have essentially resident type rates.
Mhm.
I think you should track this. If you're gonna experiment, you need to track the results.
Yeah, we need to do a better job of tracking too. I agree.
So what would be the day pass then for a non-resident, the regular rate?
It would be whatever is in option 4.
Yeah, I
So-
don't see it. I see the season pass, but I don't,
Well, this is the one that Megan noted was not accurate because it doesn't change the daily admissions at all.
It's a cut and paste
Well,
mistake, it looks like.
Yes, it's a cut and
So
paste.
what is the current
I-
season pass
it would-
rate?
The current season, the season pass or day pass? Because Mary Ann's asking
I'm
about
asking
day.
Oh,
for
you're asking
day
a day
pass. I don't
pass,
see
sorry.
the non-resident day pass in any of these.
So the day passes are treated the same. So, but as far as whether you live, if you're coming for one day, you pay the same whether you live here or not. But as far as the increases, is what Megan was asking, are they treated as resident or non-resident? And in the first 3, they're treated as a non-resident, but in the last one, there's no increase at all. So I think it was a cut and paste mistake. And I would assume, given the other increases, that it's somewhere around $10 for 19 to 61 years old, because it's $8.50 on the 70/30, and it's $8 on the 60/40. So that's gonna put it, if you put it 100% on non-residents, that's gonna make it $10. And that would be the same whether you're in town or out of town.
And how much for seniors?
Seniors would be around $5.50, $5, looking at the other percentages.
Or, you know, we could make it something like, I mean, those numbers aren't about the distribution. I mean, you know, we can make it like $8 or something, so we could be comparable to Huber Heights.
And you're talking strictly about the day passes.
Right.
So on the 30/70 split, the day passes 19 to 61 are $8.50, and 4 to 18 and seniors, 62 and older, is $4. So you want to make it a flat, assuming you're going to go with option 4, and all the other ones are where you want them to be, the day passes would be what?
Maybe, I think peg them to like Huber Heights. Okay, Dan, come back up.
I have a question about the 60/40. The 60/40 is incomplete and ambiguous. Is the 60/40, 60% of the people, it is important to know, to make the decision whether the people who are coming from out of town buy season passes or day passes. It's critical to know that before you make the decision. So when you say 60/40, what does that mean?
So, and again, we haven't tracked this properly, but the idea was that 60% of people using the pool are residents and 40% are non-residents.
I understand that.
Yep.
But you're missing my
But-
point,
but-
which is, it is critical to know the 40% who are non-residents, whether they buy season passes
Yeah.
or day passes, because you're talking about having some experience in public transportation. The kind of people who are going to this pool may be the kind of people who don't buy season passes, okay, that they buy day passes.
Right.
And so if you lump in a double on the day pass, you may really, really kill the golden goose. You at least need to know what the split is before you decide where to put all the money.
Well, I mean, the reality is we don't know because we haven't tracked that, unfortunately. So,
At that point, you have no control, so even if you figure out what you get this year, you won't know if that made it any better. That's not really an experiment.
well, I mean, I guess another way to think about it is we're trying to do something to balance the books on the pool. And if we find out that, you know, it's an epic fail, then we can go back to that, you know, look at it again.
Just a minute. This is an experiment, and we're going to do it. We don't have all the information, but that's what's happening. So it's not going to be like 100% predictable, accurate. We'll see how it works. So
But
we got your point.
Yeah, but I do think that having it equal to Huber Heights, you know, to another, just bringing it up to that level is helpful. Because it's like swap, where are you going to go if they're the same price?
Right.
I have a question about the Huber Heights Aquatic, because is that the one that's connected to their Y? It's very different. It's not just a regular municipal pool. It's got all kinds of stuff. It's really cool. It's decked out and, yeah, it's a water park. It's got a lazy river. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call that apples to apples. So that's why I'm kind of like, I don't know. I feel like if people are choosing between, if it's closer, then I can understand, but if they're saying, okay, go to Huber Heights or go into the pool in Yellow Springs, and it's the same price, not to say anything about our pool, I think it's great, but folks are probably going to pick that one over it.
Well, I mean, we could peg it to Tip City too, or New Carlisle. I mean, I think the point is that, you know, we haven't done anything in 10 years. We are trying to balance things, but we also have to recognize that we operate the pool at a loss. And we do that because we understand that it's an important community asset, and we're the only community in Greene County that is stepping up to do this. I think that's the important message here.
I mean, I would prefer to give some general direction to staff and let staff make the decision. Spending a half hour or an hour on the individual rates for the pool seems a bit micromanaging.
But this needs to be passed as an ordinance by council. So, I mean, staff has given you our recommendation, and we've given you the different options that you asked for, but we need to pass this so that because even once we read it a second time, it's still 30 days before it goes into effect. So even at this point, it may have very little effect this year, because a lot of people, other than the day passes,
Right.
will have already bought their passes.
This is great, you have a control. You can look at the beginning of the season, the end of the season.
Dan, if you want to speak, you have to come to the mic. All right, well, I think, can the general direction be that we try not to give increases to residents and see what happens? I
Yes.
mean, are we comfortable with that? Yeah?
So we'd be picking the fourth.
I'm comfortable doing 30, 70. I'm comfortable having some increase for residents,
Okay.
particularly because I think that it could definitely have an impact on discouraging people from out of town. So fewer of those people would come. If we put all the increase on out-of-town people.
Okay. Lisa?
I could go either way. I
Can
feel
I-
like we don't have,
Yeah.
perfect information, so.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I think that since we haven't done increases, that it's okay to do a small increase on residents. Again, I think that thinking about putting the burden completely on non-residents, especially thinking about, even if, if we had some agreement with Green Metropolitan Housing Authority, I'm just thinking about looking at our median household income in Yellow Springs versus others in Greene County, especially thinking about people who can't afford to go to private pools. I do think that we need to keep that in mind, so I agree with
So are
Marion
you
about that.
comfortable 30, 70?
Yeah.
Are you?
Sure.
Okay, I move that we do option 3, that increases residents' amount 30% and non-residents 70%. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And I'm gonna say I'm opposed. Okay? All right, so, next on the list is, Resolution 2019-23. We can read that by title only as well.
Sure, this is approving a one-year extension of the existing contract with Tech Advisors.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right, Patty?
So we originally went out with a request for proposals for IT services in 2016. We chose Tech Advisors. The contract that we signed at that time allows for 2 one-year renewal options. Tech Advisors, we've spoken to them, Johnny and I, and they would like to exercise the one-year renewal. It is at the same price. There is no increase in cost to the village. Their contract expires on June the 30th, so this will take it through June the 30th of next year, and then there will still be one more one-year option.
I just want to emphasize, Tech Advisors has been incredible. Their service has been really solid. I've been really happy with the changes we've made to our IT support. And I think it's great that they're willing to renew their contract at no increase. Any other questions or comments from council? Questions or comments from citizens? Megan?
Megan Bachman, Yellow Springs News. I was just wondering if there's any local companies that had an opportunity to bid on this?
We had at the time, I think 6 responses. I'd have to go back and look. I think it was 6. In fact, Tech Advisors, one of the principals of Tech Advisors does live right outside of town. But we put out the request for proposals. I think there were 6 responses. I'm not positive, but until there's another RFP that goes out, there would not be another opportunity to bid on the contract.
So one thing I did want to mention is, I read all the details. Do we have any new equipment, and I guess Sean would know this best, that needs to be added to the list for community access? Because it lists all the things that are, they do service for. Have we added anything to community access?
The Castus unit arrived 2 weeks ago, a little more, so I don't know if that's on the list. But,
That takes the place of the TriCaster though, right? So,
I mean, it's a replacement, yeah.
yeah, so the TriCaster's listed, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Or not the TriCaster, sorry, the Ultra Nexus.
Well, yeah.
The TriCaster's different.
Okay, so that would be, thanks, Sean. That would be my only thing, would just be making sure that it's updated to reflect any new equipment, which I assume would not be a problem.
No.
Okay, so with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, next we have approving a contract renewal for Chief Carlson. Judy, let's go ahead and read that in full.
Okay, this is approving a contract with Police Chief Brian Carlson. Whereas Brian Carlson has served as the permanent chief of police for the Village of Yellow Springs since June of 2017. And whereas council for the Village of Yellow Springs has determined that it is currently in the best interests of the village to amend and renew the employment of Brian Carlson in the position of Chief of Police for the Village of Yellow Springs. Now therefore, the council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that. Section 1, Brian Carlson is hereby offered employment as Chief of Police for the Village of Yellow Springs to serve at the pleasure of the village manager. Section 2, the duties of the Chief of Police shall be those as provided for in the charter for the Chief of Police and pursuant to the employment agreement, which will soon be attached to this resolution as Exhibit A. Section 3, the employment agreement for the Chief of Police is hereby approved in substantially the same form as Exhibit A. The village manager is hereby authorized to execute the employment agreement and to take other such actions on behalf of the village as may be necessary to assure this appointment. Section 4, the Chief of Police shall be considered an employee on a full-time status. The employee shall receive the salary and benefits as provided for in the contract. Section 5, this resolution shall be in full force and effect upon its adoption. It is the intent of the council that the employment agreement will be effective upon signature by the parties.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Patty, you want to say anything?
The chief's contract is up later this week, actually, and so we've kind of put this to the last minute. So this contract simply renews the chief's employment as the chief of police under the conditions that will be set forth in the contract.
Okay. I mean, I will add to that a standard, and this is true for our new village manager, is that 1-year renewals are we have a precedent for that. I will also say that in general, we have been very happy with the efforts that Chief Carlson, or I've been happy with the efforts that Chief Carlson has made towards turning our police department around. As everyone knows, there are a lot of challenges these days in local policing, and we are continuing to work towards that. There's also an effort, I think everyone knows, with our policing assessment to look at how we can improve communications with the community and our police department. And one of the things that's very clear in the contract is that there are performance measures around what things we want to see out of that assessment. Chief Carlson understands that that's going to be an important part of how we look at reviewing him over the next year. Other council members have any comments?
Well, I appreciate the work that Chief Carlson has done. I don't think Yellow Springs is a very easy place to be a chief of police. And maybe no place is an easy, maybe just being a chief of police is not an easy thing. But with the attention nationally and how that has impacted Yellow Springs, regardless of what's happened in Yellow Springs, it's impacted Yellow Springs. So I'm hopeful that we will continue to be able to have the police department become more and more something that the village feels is integrated into the community and that the police officers feel that way.
Great. Lisa?
You know, I think that it's sometimes difficult to make aspirational language actionable and measurable. I think that's the case with, you know, what is affordable. I think that's the case, too, when we start to talk about community policing. Like, what does that really look like in action? And I think that perhaps a challenge that we faced is that we have a good vision statement, but as a, you know, at many levels have not achieved as much as we need to in saying, okay, what does that really look like? I mean, what we learned, or one of the things I learned from that community forum that we had, was that just last week. And by the way, thank you to the people who came, and we'll talk more about that later. You know, is that we have the opportunity to get closer and closer to saying, so I want these kinds of behaviors to occur. And once you can define the kinds of behaviors, then you can establish performance goals to say they're either happening or they're not. And not just for the chief, but for the entire police department. And also maybe even for the community to think about how they behave and engage with the community if that's possible. So I feel like when we combine all of these different actions, the police assessment, the reestablishing of the Justice Commission that Conetta's leading, that we have an opportunity to say, okay, let's kind of push a reset button and go a new village manager and try to say, okay, let's go forward and continue to focus on going forward and on improvements and not always looking backward. So that's what I'm hoping for and working for right now.
Can
Yeah, I'm really excited about the conversations that we've had and the growth mindset that our village has and that our village chief will have as well moving forward. And just thinking about how moving forward, you really have to know that there is a next step and there will always be a next step. You're never done completely. And I think that he has a mindset of continuing to grow, and I really appreciate that. And I appreciate that about our village, because I think that our village also understands that as we grow and as we learn, there will be growing pains, and I think that's pretty clear. And I'm excited to move forward as well.
All right, thanks. Comments from citizens? Eric Clark.
Hi, Eric Clark. I just wanted to, again, make a note that we are here kind of in a little bit of a gray area since we've spent an awful lot of money for Bob Wasserman to present this report to us. And what I'm hoping is that in the event that he comes up with some beneficial changes to the department, it would seem like we want to make sure that the renewed contract has the ability to absorb some of these ideas. And especially since I believe this report was going to be really a top-down approach, I think that we have to be careful that if we're going to renew this contract now with the person who is at the top, that we don't make a mistake and have that contract so locked into a typical contract language that there isn't room for some flexibility for us to implement whatever suggestions we paid for.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll follow up on that, and you can have a seat. Some of the things that I will highlight in the contract, we are doing a 3-month and a 6-month evaluation. And one thing that's very clear is that the performance measures that come out of the assessment from Bob Wasserman and Bob Haas are going to be integrated into that contract. So, one thing is timing-wise, the contract is up on June 6th. The police assessment report does not come out until the end of June. So what we have built into the contract is a clear connection between what comes out of that assessment and our expectations for continuous improvement, similar to what Canetta highlighted. So well appreciated your comments, and we have thought about this a lot. I think many of you know, council has had several discussions about this in executive session, and we feel very good about the direction that we're moving in. So, okay. Other comments? Okay. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next is Resolution 2019-25. Judy, let's go ahead and read that in full.
All right, this is appointing Denise Swinger as Planning and Zoning Inspector and Economic Development Liaison. Whereas the Village of Yellow Springs in 2015 made the decision to bring planning and zoning functions back in-house, and whereas the village manager appointed Denise Swinger to fill what was then a part-time position, and whereas over time the duties of the Planning and Zoning Inspector / Economic Development Liaison have grown and are expected to continue to grow, and whereas the village manager has considered the value of making the position a salaried position to the benefit of the taxpayers of the Village of Yellow Springs, now therefore Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that, Section 1, Denise Swinger is hereby extended an offer of employment as a salaried employee, and if accepted, shall be appointed to serve as Planning and Zoning Inspector / Economic Development Liaison for the Village of Yellow Springs to serve at the pleasure of the village manager. Section 2, the duties of the position shall be those as provided for in the job description and pursuant to the employment agreement attached here as Exhibit A. Section 3, the employment agreement is hereby approved in substantially the same form as Exhibit A. The village manager is hereby authorized to execute the employment agreement and to take other such actions on behalf of the village as may be necessary to assure this appointment. Section 4, the Planning and Zoning Inspector / Economic Development Liaison shall be considered an employee on full-time status. The employee shall receive the salary and benefits as provided for in the contract. Section 5, this resolution shall be in full force and effect upon its adoption. It is the intent of the council that the employment agreement will be effective upon signature by the parties.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right. Patty?
As council knows, I brought to your attention the fact that the Planning and Zoning Office is crazy busy, and I do not expect it to slow down anytime soon. Denise has been working quite a bit of overtime. She's actually maxed out on her compensatory time, and, we're paying her overtime. It makes sense for us to make her a salaried employee at this point because I do not see this slowing down. I did talk with Josue about this. We looked at the numbers. I've talked to Colleen, I've talked a little bit to Johnny about it. We all agree that this is the best thing for the village as far as the use of taxpayer dollars.
Okay. And I'll also add that a busy planning and zoning, activity means good things for the village in terms of community and economic development. So we're happy to hear that. The other thing is, Denise was a critical part of things like the lodging tax, which brought over 53,000 back to the village last year. So there are a lot of activities that we want to continue to support. And I don't know if any other council members have comments. Yeah, and I just also want to say Denise is not here, but the efforts that she's put into developing her skills in this job have been incredible, and she's a huge asset. Some of you may remember she was a council member way back when, and it's nice to see her serving the
didn't know
village
that.
in this capacity.
Yeah, Denise has done probably just about every job here except village manager, and maybe Johnny's job. But she is an integral part of the team. She works very, very hard. Her reports are bar none the best of any that I've seen. And so, you know, I'm really happy that she's agreed to go to a salary because she works really hard in this area, so.
Megan?
I noticed that it was the first time I saw that she's also Economic Development Liaison. Can you share some of her duties in that regard?
Yes, so Denise attends the MVRPC meetings. She's our technical assistance coordinator, is that what the tax?
Yep.
Yeah, and so she is the person who establishes those relationships with the other economic development entities. There is a Jobs Ohio website that we have some of our properties listed on, and it's Denise's responsibility to make sure that those are all updated and kept current, and to watch for potential projects that could fit here in Yellow Springs that could go on those properties.
Yeah, and I'll also say, in some of our recent meetings where we've talked about economic development opportunities, and, you know, keep in mind, some of those are not made public until those negotiations are complete. She is incredibly savvy.
Yes, she is.
So she really understands the interests of the village in terms of economic sustainability. And I appreciate that she's looking out for the ways that we can develop our community incrementally in ways that, you know, will support what we want to see in the future.
And she
So-
will drill down on details.
She does. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right. The next resolution, 2019-26, I definitely want us to read in full. Judy?
You bet. This is supporting the resilience of LGBTQ persons and the legacy of LGBTQ culture during YS Pride Week 2019, June 23rd through June 30th. Whereas on June 28th, 50 years ago, police raided the Stonewall Inn as part of an ongoing effort at the intimidation and suppression of LGBTQ people, whose passionate reaction against the raid catalyzed what is now known as the Stonewall Uprising. And whereas despite 50 years of activism and education, LGBTQ people in the United States continue to face disparities in employment, healthcare, education, and many other areas central to the pursuit of happiness in the United States. And whereas 31 states have no explicit ban on discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity in the workplace, housing, or public accommodations, and 36 states have no explicit ban on discrimination against LGBTQ individuals in education. And whereas LGBTQ youth are at increased risk of suicide, homelessness, and becoming victims of bullying and violence, and whereas LGBTQ people in the United States, in particular transgender individuals, face a disproportionately high risk of becoming victims of violent hate crimes, and whereas despite being marginalized throughout the colonial history of the United States, LGBTQ people in the United States continue to celebrate their identities, relationships, and contributions in various expressions of pride, and whereas LGBTQ people in the United States continue to fight for equal treatment, dignity, and respect, now therefore be it resolved by the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs that, Section 1, Village Council takes pride in the diversity of our community and commits to ensuring the equal treatment and protection of all villagers, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity. Section 2, Village Council encourages the celebration of June 23rd through June 30th as YS Pride Week in order to provide the opportunity for all villagers and visitors to learn about the discrimination and inequality that the LGBTQ community endures and to celebrate the contributions of the LGBTQ community.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
Okay. Comments from council? Kaneda?
Yeah, I just am very excited about this, and I think that it does a great job of, emotional, not only acknowledging the great contributions that LGBTQ people have had, but also what LGBTQ people face, and that's real. And I think that even though we're a small community, taking a step like this is a step a giant step in the right direction.
I
All right,
I
Lisa?
strongly agree. This is a lovely, well-written resolution.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. Judy was the main author of this. Marianne?
Nope, I don't.
Yeah, I just want to say, this is part of why I do what I do. So, any comments from citizens? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. All right, next up, we have Resolution 2019-27, and let's read that in full as well.
This is much less emotional. Strongly urging the Ohio Governor and members of the Ohio General Assembly to restore the local government fund to pre-recession levels. Whereas the local government fund was reduced in 2011 by 50% during the Kasich administration, from 3.68% of general revenue funds to current levels of 1.66% of general revenue funds. And whereas past Ohio General Assemblies have repeatedly decreased funding and revenue sharing in recent years, in addition to significantly reducing the local government fund, including eliminating the estate tax and phasing out the tangible property tax. And whereas these reductions have resulted in the loss of billions of dollars of critical funding to municipalities and in the loss of approximately $698,000 to the village of Yellow Springs. And whereas this sudden loss of revenue has made it increasingly difficult to provide basic services to Ohioans, as well as to maintain critical infrastructure and to bolster public safety services to fight the opioid epidemic. And whereas when municipalities experience success in fostering safe communities, building sound infrastructure, and increasing economic development, the state of Ohio reaps the benefits as well. Now therefore be it resolved by the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, that Section 1, the Ohio General Assembly and Administration should restore the local government fund to pre-recession levels, ensuring that local communities are able to provide crucial services and improvements in infrastructure, public safety, and quality of life for their citizens. Section 2, this council does hereby declare its opposition to any further cuts to the local government fund or the future diversion of revenues from the local government fund.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, Patty, you want to start?
I do, because this is something that I get emotional about, because think of what we could have done with $698,000. And, I was working in a community slightly smaller than this when the recession hit and they started cutting these funds back. And it has had a devastating effect on some of the smaller communities. It's difficult for us to absorb that kind of a loss, but when you talk about a community that has even less revenue than the Village of Yellow Springs, this is an incredibly important, this funding is incredibly important for them to restore to local governments. This is part of the reason the infrastructure is the way it is. It's part of the reason that communities have been unable to keep up with services. It is so important that this gets restored to its pre-recession levels.
Yeah, so when Marianne and I started council, this is when the local government fund started being slashed, and, again, by 50%. And, we experienced as a village our budget going into the red. It was a huge impact. And, it was sort of under this umbrella, ironically, of filling up this rainy day fund, which has billions of dollars in it. And, one of the things that, a lot of municipalities have experienced, as Patty mentioned, is not being able to provide the services to their communities that they need to. Again, we've been able to figure out strategies to get back in the black, but it's a really hard hit. I'm very encouraged by our new governor, DeWine, who has mentioned on many occasions his support for local governments. And I think that this is the kind of resolution that will resonate with him as well as other state legislators. And there's no reason to sit on several $1 billion when communities are suffering. So I'm really glad that we're supporting this, as well as most communities across the state, because these are dollars where it makes sense to support local governments, because at the end of the day, local governments understand what their citizens need, and all the infrastructure needs that we have, I mean, Johnny knows this better than anyone, this is the kind of money that can go towards fixing those, sewer and water lines and all the other things that we need to do. So
Yeah.
I really hope that we see some traction on this.
Yeah, and when you combine the cuts in the local government fund with the loss of the estate tax and the tangible property tax and the loss of federal funds for infrastructure, I mean, it's had a devastating effect across the nation on smaller communities in particular. I mean, to the effect that the Ohio Public Works Commission has actually created a small governments fund to help if you don't get funded in the primary level of OPWC and you're less than 5,000 in population, you can apply for a second pot of funding because they know how critical the funding is.
Right.
So,
Well,
Mary
I
Ann?
feel very strongly about this, too.
Yes.
I think that democracy can be its best at the local level. I mean, that's where people can come and talk and make decisions and have an impact. And for those who are against big government, then what we need is strong, small government. And to continue cutting funding for small governments is, I think, part of a disaster for our democracy.
Yes. Any other comments? Questions or comments from citizens? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Judy, I just want to make sure that we send this to Governor DeWine, Representative Perales, Senator Hackett. Okay,
Yep,
great.
got it.
All right. Next, we have Resolution 2019-28. Let's read that in full as well.
Holy smoke.
Uh,
This is opposing Ohio House Bill 6. Whereas the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio has partnered with other municipal electric systems to invest in traditional and renewable energy projects in Ohio and the region to supply our customers with cost-effective, reliable power. And whereas House Bill 6, HB 6, currently pending in the Ohio House of Representatives, would effectively replace the Ohio Renewable Portfolio Standard that incentivizes all renewable energy generation with the new Ohio Clean Air Program to provide subsidies to certain electric generating facilities. And whereas House Bill 6 fails to recognize municipal electric communities for their significant investments in zero-emission and low-emission energy projects. Whereas House Bill 6 specifically excludes generating assets owned by or providing power to municipal electric systems from being eligible to apply for funds through the Ohio Clean Air Program. Whereas House Bill 6 impacts the wholesale energy and capacity markets in PJM by subsidizing a limited set of generating assets with out-of-market payments. Whereas changes to the renewable portfolio standard as proposed in House Bill 6 will devalue renewable energy credits produced by renewable energy projects, including zero-carbon emission projects. And whereas the Ohio Municipal Electric Association and American Municipal Power Incorporated, of which this community is a member of both, have submitted amendments that would reduce the overall impact of the legislation on our community and customers. And whereas those proposed amendments have not been included in any version of House Bill 6, now therefore be it resolved that Section 1, the Village of Yellow Springs opposes Ohio House Bill 6 and any legislation that would unduly discriminate against zero carbon emission, reduced carbon emission, and renewable generation resources owned by or serving municipal electric customers by subsidizing similarly situated generation resources. Section 2, the Village of Yellow Springs opposes Ohio House Bill 6 and any legislation that would devalue the Ohio Renewable Portfolio Standard that incentivizes the continuation of operation as well as the development of new renewable and zero carbon emissions generation resources in Ohio. Section 3, the Village of Yellow Springs urges our state representatives and state senator to oppose this legislation unless changes are made to mitigate the impact of the bill on our community and our customers. Section 4, a copy of this resolution shall be sent to our state representative, state senator, and Governor Mike DeWine.
Okay. Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right, Patty?
essentially, House Bill 6 funds nuclear power plants, the generation of power through nuclear power plants. It is subsidizing them to the detriment of other forms of clean energy by allowing them to apply for funding that other clean energy sources are not allowed to apply for. It could directly affect our RECs, our renewable energy credits, which we are one of the few communities in Ohio that actually retain our RECs. We don't sell them, we retain them for ourselves. And that could, at some future point, have an impact on the ability to get a better rate on the funding to purchase the solar array that is out on the glass farm. In addition to that, it could directly affect the market rates in the PJM market, where we actively buy and auction certain energy. I did get an update from Michael Byrne at AMP last Friday, and it does say that on Wednesday, the Ohio House amended and ultimately passed House Bill 6. Gives a breakdown of Republicans versus Democrats. The bill would subsidize First Energy Solutions to nuclear power plants through a statewide charge assessed to investor-owned utility companies, and would grant the IOUs the right to seek recovery through 2030 of their costs of operating 2 coal plants. So there were some minor changes to the bill. The windfall protection will adjust down the subsidy of First Energy Solutions credit on the wholesale market. It will require a clean air resource to maintain operations in the state. It will prohibit a nuclear entity from receiving funds under OCAP plans for reducing its taxable property value. It will require the program to be audited by a third party, and it will allow 5 plus 50 megawatt solar projects previously approved to be eligible for OCAP funds. So there were some positive changes, but there's still a long way to go. It's going to go to the Senate next. So we do need to pass this resolution and continue to oppose the bill in its current form. We've gained a little ground, but there's still a ways to go. So Johnny, do you have anything you?
Okay.
So this bill essentially benefits the nuclear power industry, is that?
Actually, nuclear and coal, if you can believe that. It
Nuclear
goes-
and coal.
Yes, because
So
it's
this is like a head
subsidizing,
in the sand bill
pretty
to
much.
benefit the capitalists who own those companies.
I would not
To the
disagree with that
detriment to the
statement.
future, the detriment to the future
Yes.
life on this planet. Okay,
I think that was well put, Mary Ann,
Pretty
actually.
much, yeah.
Yes. All right. Megan?
After that, I hate to ask this question, but will it increase the rates of ratepayers in Yellow Springs?
Potentially in its current form. There's no hard evidence that it will or won't, but that is what AMP is projecting it could do, yes.
Any other questions or comments? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, and last piece of legislation, 2019-29. We can read this by title only.
This is approving check signing privileges for U.S. Bank / general checking and guaranteed deposits.
Can I get a motion?
I move.
Second.
All right, Patty?
This is simply, it'll be changing the ability, the check signers that are listed with the bank. It will at one point be taking me off and putting Josue on, which is logical. Judy and I talked about effective date today, and did you change that, or
Yep.
did you? Okay. So I think the 17th is the effective date now?
Correct.
So I can still sign checks for the next 2 weeks, but once Josue gets in here, he can be a check signer, which it's really important because a lot of times a big stack of checks will land on my desk. And the checks do require 2 signers, and we only have four people that can sign checks, so.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
Is Judy a new addition, or has?
No,
she's- so
Judy
it's
is
just
on
the
there.
Josue?
Judy, Johnny, Colleen, and myself right now.
Just Josue is the only.
Yeah.
change.
Okay, all right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. We have no special reports, so at this point, we are now at citizen concerns. This is the time on the agenda where if you have any comments about things that are not on the agenda, we would entertain those. And it sounds like Harvey Page has got something.
Did sign up.
That's okay.
I'm Harvey Page, and I wish I had about 10 minutes because there's a lot of material. In 2010, my brothers and I sold my mom's house, and I wanted to do something useful with my part of the money, which would honor her. And so we have the Violet Mackey Page Memorial Solar Array, about $28,000, just out of that hunk of money. At the time I installed, which was 2011, April 2011, net metering was in effect. That meant that I put into the grid during the day, took out of the grid at night. And my annual production was always more, I think Johnny can confirm, always more than my annual consumption. And that was fine with me, because it's an environmental thing. Then, maybe 2 years ago, they installed bidirectional meters, and I said, is this going to be charging me retail at night and paying me wholesale during the day? Oh, no, that's not the plan. Well, at the end of that year, I got a check for, I don't know, $123 or something like that. And that's okay, but I didn't need it. But then January and February, I had to be sure that I scraped the snow off the panels so that I could keep up. I'm getting older. I'm not going to be able to sweep that snow forever. Well, surprise, surprise. On Friday, I discovered that now it's monthly. And so Resolution 27 and 28, you sound a little hypocritical. Because now, at the end of the month, I'm being paid for what I've produced wholesale and being charged what I use retail. I wasn't told this was going to happen. I was told it wasn't going to happen. It did happen. I mean, there are two things. Number one, it discourages other people if they don't know what the future is going to be. Yeah, this is the law now, this is the regulation now, but maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, it'll be different. So how do you plan, especially things like solar? You know, people asked me, what will the payback be? I said, I won't live long enough, but it doesn't matter. It honors my mom, and it's something that I wanted to do. And I feel stabbed in the back, right? I mean, you're asking for the, and it probably won't make any difference. It's certainly not going to bankrupt me. That's not the question. I mean, it is, as I say, a knife in the back. And it does affect greatly the way I feel about my adopted village, right? My willingness to do things. I do things. My willingness is going to decrease. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Harvey. Anything to comment about?
Harvey, have you talked to Johnny about this, or?
I got the bill on Friday.
Okay.
Right here. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Okay, how about if we get in touch with you tomorrow and set up a meeting? Would that, and we can explain to you why it changed, and I think that might help you understand a little bit.
It won't.
Okay.
Well, I will say, I do want to put this on the agenda because I know there's a lot of solar activity going on in the village. So I've already talked to Johnny and Patty about this. So we'll be following up on it.
Well, yeah, we brought it to council for an amendment to the ordinance last year, I think. Prior to that, the true-up was every November, and once a year. And then do you want to explain the reasoning that it changed? Because you probably remember it.
Well,
Okay.
I think it might be helpful for us to
What this
understand.
means is that with no investment at all, and by the way, I've been paying $10 a month without, or now it's 12, right? And I didn't complain, right? But what it means is that if I generate quite a bit in, say, June, and then July is cloudy, I'll be paying back at twice the rate. It'll be 100% profit for the village with no investment. Is that fair? If that's fair, I mean, I don't know what the official reason is, but I object to it. I object to it, and I will argue against it.
Well,
I
and
guess, as
and-
a council person, I would like this to be handled by staff first and come back to council so we can understand it. I think
Right. And I will tell you that we are one of the few municipalities that actually pay solar, those who have solar, we're one of the few municipalities that actually pay them back. And in fact, there are municipalities that if you generate more than you use with solar, they will disconnect you.
Okay,
And-
well, I mean, we're going to do what we're going to do, but we need to understand it. It's not a simple
Right.
thing.
I mean, I think the other thing is, I appreciate the comment around planning. I also know that, there's a lot of activity right now around encouraging people, to do solar. And so I want to make sure that we're very transparent about how that works. Keeping in mind, that, we do have contracts to maintain a 90% plus renewable energy portfolio. So I know that's, part of the reasoning, but I don't want to speak too far without, having the facts. So Harvey, thanks for bringing that up. Since you're here, I also wanted to mention that I'd like next time to find out what we're going to do about the signs for no bikes and skateboards and whatever on the sidewalks. Okay, good, because I saw your letter, and, I'm always doing citizen arrests downtown. And so, so I want to address that as well. So let's have those both talked about at the next meeting. Thank you.
Do you
Any-
want
yes.
discussion item, or do you just want a village manager report for the signs?
Village manager report's fine.
Okay.
Any other citizen concerns, things not on the agenda? All right, let's move into old business then. So first thing is the John Bryan Pottery Center discussion. Patty, I guess you're going to start that one off?
Sure. Just writing myself a note.
Yeah, I should
So-
say John Bryan Community Pottery is,
So, as council knows, we have been in discussions with the John Bryan Community Pottery about the lease on the building. We've done a little bit of back and forth, primarily with Roger, but we did have a larger meeting with some of the other board members. And they have given us a proposal for $300 a month rent with a 5% bump each year for 5 years, as well as raising 1/3 of the repair costs for the building over a 3-year period. The one thing that they did have in their proposal was a 10-year option at the end of the initial 5-year lease. And as I explained to Roger in an email, we don't generally give 10-year options to anybody. So most of our leases are for 1, 2, or 3 years with perhaps a 1 or 2 year option at the end. So staff's recommendation from Johnny and myself is that we accept the proposal from the John Bryan Community Pottery, all of the conditions except for the 10-year option at the end.
What would the lease be then? 5-year lease?
It would be a 5-year lease. The first year would be $300 a month, 5% bump each year after that annually on the lease date. And then 1/3 of the estimated maintenance budget, which they will provide over 3 years. So it wouldn't be a lump sum, it would be a total over a 3-year period. Roger, is that correct? Everything I said was correct, right?
Okay. Questions or comments from council? So I want to say, first of all, we love having John Bryan Community Pottery as in our, village space. I believe I can speak for council in saying that we support that. One of the things that was talked about last year was that based on projections for our budget, which, are not looking good, we're trying to stay out of the red. We have to look at ways to, get contributions from, a variety of folks that in the past, I think maybe our coffers were able to accommodate. So that includes, the baseball, softball folks. This was something that when we talked about the budget last year, we basically looked at how can we continue to support with taxpayer dollars the things that we think are great about this village, but also get support from those entities. So, I want to make it clear that this is something that we're looking at across the board for all the things that we do. We want to continue to, have a community that supports nonprofits and supports a variety of community activities. But we also have to think about the fiscal responsibility that we're charged with. So I really appreciate that we were able to, I hope, negotiate something that seems fair to everyone. And in general, we try our best to support our nonprofits in whatever ways we can. But again, understanding there is that balance that we have to strike. So, so that being said, I don't know if, Roger, do you have?
Is now the time?
Yes, please.
My first time at the podium.
Nice. Your first time, really?
I know. Now that I see how this works, I may be back. This looks like fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Roger Reynolds. I'm the treasurer of the John Bryan Community Pottery. And we're here basically to answer questions this evening. But one thing we would like to say is thanks to the village for an unbelievable arrangement for the last 40-plus years. We don't object to paying rent. We think it's probably past due, so we're not going to object to that point at all. The issue, I think, was how much we can afford to pay. And as a nonprofit that lives on the edge, I think we've stretched ourselves a little bit, and I think we're going to be able to do this, and that's the plan. One thing, the wording was two different ways, the wording about the extra pay for the deferred maintenance. One of the things you said was that we would pay 1/3 of the maintenance. And the other one was you would pay 1/3 of the estimate. So we've looked at the estimate, which was, I think, around $36,000. And we said, we will work with that $12,000. But on the other hand, if it comes up to be $100,000 and you go, oh yeah, you said 1/3, that's probably not going to work for us. So where we are now is $300 a month, like you said, and the $12,000 is the number that we've looked at across those first 3 years and help restore that building so it's much more functional than it is today.
Right, and that's what I meant.
Okay, all right, fine. But that's the sensitive issue, because that's the number that, not knowing that number would really change our thought a little bit about how that was going to work out, so.
No, I understand.
But, so we're fine with working on a $300 rent, I'm not going to object to that. It's
Great.
probably long past due, I shouldn't probably say that out loud, right? But it's been and we think that the Pottery Studio makes a huge contribution to the village and to the art scene. We have people all over the country follow some of our websites. We have classes for kids, for adults, handicapped. We've worked with the school system. We've got a program getting ready to start right now with the senior center. So I think we make a difference in the community and probably the quality of life overall. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Roger.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
How'd I do? Can I come back again?
Yeah, that was great. Wow, and you stayed under 3 minutes too, so we appreciate that. And yeah, and I want to, give a here to, we agree that the pot shop, I love to say, does make a difference in our community. And, we want to continue to, as I said, support John Bryan Community Pottery and other nonprofits as much as we can. I believe that our citizens overall support that activity as well, and thank you so much.
So,
Right.
so just so I'm clear what we're discussing, a 5-year lease, $300 a month for the first year with a 3% increase each year thereafter, and a 1/3 of the estimated repairs to be capped at $12,000.
Right, it was a 5% increase, but everything
Oh, a
else.
5%.
Yep. Yes, yes, Megan?
Is there a renewal of any number? 1 year, 2 years,
5 years.
5 years?
No.
5 years, then 5-year renewal?
She's asking about at the end, are you going,
Is there an
do you want an
option?
option to renew at the end?
I just assumed that there'd always be options to renew,
We don't.
but maybe it has to be stated.
Yeah, it has to be stated, because there aren't always. So, for instance, Stony Creek will be coming later this year asking you to renew their lease, because
Well,
they don't have an
We can say
option.
an option to renew. It doesn't state what the renewal will be, right?
Yeah, you have to state what so it would either be for the same 5 years, or 3 years, or,
But, I mean, does it have to say what the rent would be, or the terms of conditions?
it should state 5-year renewal under the same conditions as the original. Roger has something.
Yep.
One of the things that happens to us is we invest a little bit of money in these kilns, and we don't want to invest money in a kiln and rebuild that wood kiln, for example, and then find out that 12 months after we rebuild it, we're out of business. That was the original thought process between asking for about 10 years. So if we go 5 years with another option, obviously to be discussed as far as the terms are concerned, that makes us more comfortable about also investing in our own equipment to keep the studio running and efficient and interesting for people to come and take classes. So that was the reason for the longer term,
Sure.
okay?
Yep.
So an option to say, to discuss another 5-year renewal would be what we would prefer if we can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
That makes sense.
What do you guys think?
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about a 5-year option? Okay, I'm okay with that as well. So,
Under conditions similar to the original lease,
well, I mean, yeah. if
or
it's-
terms
if-
to be discussed.
Terms
I
to
mean,
be
it-
discussed.
Well, no, if it's an option to renew, it would be the same terms. Otherwise, it would be renegotiating
Well,
the
I'm
lease.
concerned mostly about the rental price and about maintenance. So what if there's a huge maintenance cost? Or what if we say, okay, we want to raise the rent, to 10% above whatever it was?
Then we would not have an option to renew the lease. Because, I mean, an option to renew means under the same terms.
I'm learning stuff tonight. Thank you for
can't just
asking
say
good
option
questions.
to renew with terms to be negotiated? Why not?
You can, but I think that's an uncertainty that probably the pottery would not want. I mean, I guess the question for the pottery folks would be, if the option to renew were for 5 years, would you still be able to absorb the 5% increase in those years? Or would you want to renegotiate terms at that point?
I think 5-year timeline's fine.
You have to come up.
Yeah.
Do you know why? So people who are listening, yeah.
So I think the 5-year renewing, having the option to renew it 5 years with the other terms negotiated, I think would be okay, because we understand there's changing conditions. But the time limit is critical for us because we're making our own investment as well. And I also like to point out, when we talk about rental, what rental rates are worth and what that building might be worth, that building probably would be hard to rent. A lot of things are grandfathered in, and I have a feeling that the Greene County inspectors would have a field day with us if they came in and said, oh, yeah, you want to rehab this for another tenant to make it inhabitable by somebody else. I think it would be really a challenge. I don't know for sure, but that's what I think.
So you're saying a 5-year option with the terms to be negotiated?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, because we understand conditions change.
Okay.
I'll get it in the
This is the
works.
last time I'm coming up here.
Sit
Yeah,
close.
we're not gonna let you come up again. Okay, so I think we have a motion for, Patty explained the conditions and a 5-year option for renewal with terms to be renegotiated. Can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
I'll try to get that done for the next council meeting to take effect July 1.
All right, all right. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the Greene County Grant Funds. So Patty, I think you're leading this one off.
Yes, so staff was asked to provide a bullet point list of possible uses for the Greene County grant, the grant from the Greene County Commissioners. The grant was in the amount of $22,084.57 and must be used for a permanent public infrastructure improvement. I did confirm, because there was a question after the last meeting, someone approached me and said, were we sure that engineering for that infrastructure improvement was a legitimate use of the funds? I did confirm with Brandon Huddleston, the county administrator, that yes, it is. Brandon's comment was, you can't have a public infrastructure improvement without engineering. The thing that the commissioners did emphasize when they granted the funds to the communities was a return on investment. So in front of you, in my brief, you have 4 possible uses of the grant funds. These are in order of recommendation by staff of the best use and the highest return on investment. I can go through those if you like, or you can just read them.
I have some questions about the parking area, which I totally support.
Which one, Mary Ann? The
One.
tennis court one?
Number
Okay.
1, the tennis courts. I'd like a little more explanation of how that is going to work. One, I would assume that a parking lot, you can't just make a tennis court into a parking lot. I would think you'd have to beef up the foundation. I don't know. But, so I'd like to know about that. And then is the idea that it would be gated and only used for special events and closed the rest of the time?
Well, let's address the first one first. You're correct. The asphalt is 3 inches on that tennis court right now. We have driven many trucks on it, and I'm not saying that it's going to be exactly what it needs to be this first year, but to get it to where we can start using it, we need to blacktop to where we're at. And then it's going to be for small cars. You ain't going to be able to drive no big trucks in there. So you're going to enter down by the bike path, and it'll be diagonal parking. We're going to make it to where it's seal coated to where it's all black. We can stripe it. In order for events, we would put cones out there. Sam would let the people know that it's permit parking only, and we'd hang a sign up there to where they have to have a permit or some kind of placard in their windshield to be able to park back here.
So it'll be accessible from
It'd be
the
accessible.
current driveway
It'd
by
be
the
one
bike.
in and one out. It'd be used the same way.
Oh.
You won't be able to drive in and go out another way. Which, one way in, one way out, same entrance.
And when there is not an event going on?
When there's
it
not
will
an
be
event,
open.
it'll be open to the public.
And it only costs $10,500.
to finish it. We've done a lot of work, and actually, we was hoping to get it done before then, but we've done more work than what we had decided to do by removing a lot of the dead trees with the help of the tree committee, identifying them, moving the basketball courts over to the other one, reusing the same poles, cutting them down, getting new backboards, putting new concrete apron down to the skate park area. I feel that we can get it to where we can use it. We need to keep a fence up, but we're gonna try to lower the fence to like a 3-foot because we don't want people driving off that embankment wall where the police cars are, because it would happen. So we want something there to stop people from coming in that way. And then the other money would be used to clean out the vegetation and gravel the rest of the parking lot on Railroad Street. And then try to put some kind of parking blocks to kind of maintain some kind of ordinance over there, order, sorry, some kind of order, because they park 3 and 4 deep, and if you're the person close to the block, you ain't leaving until 3 other cars leave.
Right, so you could actually do 1 and 2. They kind of go
Right.
hand in hand.
So Johnny, not directly related to this, but when are the basketball courts going to be?
We have the new backboards, we are reusing them, so we had to build a bracket
Okay.
for those, and they was in the process of doing them last week, they ran behind, and then they started blacktopping today to try to get some of the holes filled, so hopefully, they're doing it on the rain days, so hopefully we'll at least have a couple of them up, hopefully by the end of the week.
Awesome. Okay.
Question about, I understand that 1 and 2 are really 1.
Yes.
2 says that there would be a donation box plus reserve parking fees, but 1 doesn't have a donation box.
We can, and we can add a donation box there as well. I
Yeah, I'd
mean,
like to do that.
it's-
Yeah, I mean, I think why not? I mean, I understand that enforcing it is perhaps,
And I really think, to be honest with you, I think we ought to put it somewhere close down by the entrance.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because people that want to donate for the electric charging stations at the same time, we had a gentleman come in the other day and said, hey, I really love this, and he gave the lady some cash downstairs for the electric bill for that, so.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Let's put donation boxes at both.
It may actually be worth thinking about having two.
Two different
on the
areas.
Bryan Center lot, one up by the front and perhaps one back by the new lot.
Yes.
Because
So it's
people may want to be
May
hitting
go to
the bag path
Correct.
from that.
Right there by that pole.
Yeah, so,
Right,
we would need a total of 3.
yes.
Cool. Because we could also add like a nice message about being a welcoming community and that, you know, we, appreciate visitors, but we also, okay, like that. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the Fairfield, the sidewalk. If we didn't use this money from the county for the sidewalk, we have other options.
Right,
yes.
We're about to
Like
talk
lodging,
about,
town,
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
good, yeah, I
Yeah.
think we're going the same place.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's kind of why we put these together on the agenda.
Thank you.
yes.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
So clever. Okay, well, I mean, I'm getting a sense that we like options 1 and 2. I do. So, okay, thanks, Johnny.
Golf cart parking,
It's at 343. Got it for you.
It's a nice walk into town, too. On the soon-to-be-completed Clifton Wyeth Clifton Connect.
There you go.
tiny Teslas.
All right, so I guess we should probably make a motion to formalize this, to use the Greene County funds for completing the parking lot and also doing
Visitor
improvements.
parking.
Yes.
Basically, that's what we're
Right.
encouraging.
And then improvements on Dayton Railroad Street. Can I get a motion?
Yes, I move that we agree to use the Greene County grant money for 1 and 2 parking at the Bryan Center and at the Railroad Street property.
I second.
3 donation
With
boxes.
Yes.
donation boxes.
Canetta seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, wow, cool. And then we'll have our report ready in October, and the county will love us. Okay, and then I guess I wanted to mention again that this is supposed to be an ongoing, revenue source. The county is looking at possibly doubling that amount at the end of this year. So, especially if communities are, showing that they really thought about this return on investment thing. So I appreciate you guys looking at that. Okay, so next on old business is reinvesting the lodging tax. I mentioned earlier that we have just over 53,000. Actually, one of the things I mentioned before, Jim, you weren't here, is that one thing I did appreciate in your letter is that we should be thinking about that money not just going into our general fund, but going back to the community, and understanding that there is a toll that tourism takes on a community, and I think it's great that we're a destination town. It allows us to be a thriving community, but we also want to give back to our citizens, which is why this discussion was initiated by me. So related to, I guess, Mary Ann's question, and we had talked about this before, we do have this commitment to complete the Safe Routes to School project. And so if I'm reading this correctly, 32,000 will complete the project, right? That's not engineering, that's to lay the sidewalk. Which would also allow us to foray into the participatory budgeting, which we talked about as well. So anyway, so I'll just tee that up. Thoughts?
Well, I think that using the money to complete the Safe Routes to School makes sense. Having safe sidewalks helps the whole community, even if I don't walk on that sidewalk. It's helping the community, especially when we think of children walking on the sidewalk. So I support that. In terms of the participatory budgeting, I think we need to get up to speed with that. And if we wanted to, say, set the other 15, 20, whatever, toward next year, then I think I'd like to see a process where, one, at council, we talk about what we mean by participatory budgeting. We make sure that community understands it, and then we decide on a process for how to get the ideas, and probably it would be sort of some kind of voting contest, like having people come up with ideas and we vote for the top 3 or something, and then we dig down and take the top 3 and vote for them or something. But, I mean, I see
Right.
that as taking some time to do that.
Sure. And
Not this
Lisa was going to jump in
Yeah,
on that.
at the last meeting, I agreed to start working on and then work with Brian to do a brief about participatory budgeting. What does it mean? Where is it done? What does the research say? What are the pitfalls, And so.
And a
I
potential
think-
process.
And
as
right,
well.
and potential examples of process. So I think we're on this, heading in that direction. But there's a lot out there about it in different formats, so kind of distilling it is a chunk of work.
Right. And so, I mean, I agree. I don't think we're making a decision tonight about that other 20,000. But I do like the idea. I mean, it's actually in our goals to get into that on some level. And so I think this is an opportunity to try it out. But I think the decision on the table right now is, do we want to commit, 32,000 of that 53 to completing the Safe Routes to School project?
I think we committed to doing it. We've already committed to completing it, right?
Right, but do we want those funds to?
I think I do think we should.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have a commitment to complete it, and the money is there, and it benefits the residents of our community, and it's
Yes.
in line with our values and our goals.
Right. I mean, to me, it's like exactly what I thought about when I thought about, reinvesting these funds in the for the community. I mean, it's, pretty clear. Okay?
So that will come to you as a supplemental appropriation to move the money to the appropriate line, just so you know.
Okay. So then it sounds like we don't need to vote, because we'll bring it to the next meeting or something?
Whenever Colleen next brings supplementals,
Okay.
she will bring it.
And then what are we saying about the money, the 20,000, whatever it is? Are we just going to hold it there until we decide about the participatory
Yes.
budgeting?
Well,
Which would be next year, probably sometime.
Well, and I probably need to talk to Colleen about that, because if you want to make sure that that dollar amount is used next year for participatory budgeting, it needs to be set aside in a particular way, because you don't have a line at the end of the year, that money would transfer into the general fund, which is not where you want it to go.
Right.
If you want it to be specifically set aside. So let me talk to Colleen about the best way to earmark that remaining funds
Right.
for participatory budgeting next year.
And I think it's still up for discussion when it happens, right? I mean, we've got it on the agenda for, is it June 17th?
For what?
When did we decide we were bringing that report?
I hope it was.
Yes.
It is June
June
17th.
17.
So I think at that point, we decide, when we want to move forward, or we start to have that discussion, so. But at the end of the day, those are funds that are in the general fund that, I mean, unlike the Greene County funds, there's not a timeline on
Yeah,
when we.
yeah. I just thought if we said that's what we wanted to do, then we want to have some mechanism so we remember
Yes.
it's set aside.
Yeah. Okay. So then, I guess as soon as possible, if we can, bring something forward for us to vote on about the sidewalk project, that would be great. Okay.
She should be coming up on a supplemental soon. Jim.
Citizen comment?
Oh, yeah, Jim.
Jim Hammond with Mills Park Hotel. Got a couple comments. Council enacted the lodging tax. Your argument for that was to address a projected deficit and to combat infrastructure burden caused by tourism. No sidewalks were mentioned, and since that, and in the last 2 years, you've had surpluses for 2 years, so there's no deficit. It was a projected deficit, not realized, it's a surplus. And the second thing is there's no measurable impact from tourism, at least caused by the hotel and the other bed and breakfast in town. There's no problem. We have our own parking lots, there's absolutely no burden on infrastructure. So with those two things, there's no reason for you to even keep the lodging tax, is my one comment. If you want to keep that lodging tax, you need to look at Ohio laws, because you go on their website, lodging taxes must be used to promote tourism. Yes, it does.
That's for the county, but anyway.
Okay, you better read it, because it says that for the county, for their 3%, which they give the CBB, and village and municipalities are regulated also. A lot of states, you have to submit a report on what you did with that money. So I see big problems with this. Another problem is, you're taxing 5% of the so-called tourists to pay for, the other 95%, but there's still no real burden caused by tourists. Tourists bring a lot of money into this village, especially the 5% that stay in the village. So I don't know how you can enact an ordinance for a specific reason and then change your mind later on and decide to use the money for something else. So.
Okay, so I will respond to that. I mean, you don't have to stay standing if you want. But I will say, first of all, that we have researched the law. The funds for municipal lodging tax go into the general fund, and they can be spent in whatever way we want them to be spent. But that being said, and council didn't make a decision about this, but, you know, I've been a big advocate, and again, it was partly because of your comments about, you know, that we didn't need this. I don't know how anyone can think that tourism doesn't have an impact on any community. People walk on those sidewalks, people use our water and our sewer, they use our electric, and so it does have a huge impact on our infrastructure. And so we have to balance that out. And I believe strongly that it's our responsibility to our community to give back and balance those impacts. Now, I agree with you that there are great benefits to being a destination, all right? No doubt about it. I support all the activity that we have. But, you know, the idea that we're going to be, you know, forever in this like great position with our budget is definitely not true. Johnny can tell you, if we fixed all the infrastructure we wanted to fix today, we would be, I mean, there's no way we could afford it. We need to replace sewer lines, we need to do a lot of things, and a lot of that does have to do with the economic development, and that includes tourism in town. So, I mean, I understand that you don't like this, but at the same time, every community that I know of, except for Cedarville, has a lodging tax. And so I feel like we made a responsible decision, and now what we're doing is we're giving back to the community with those dollars. We could just keep those in the general fund. We could, you know, do whatever we want with them, but we are making an effort to show the community that we value the quality of life here. And so I'm never going to feel personally bad about that decision. And I also think 99% of this community, if not more, has supported that decision the council made. So, Jim, yeah.
I still have to point out that the 5% of the folks that stay in the lodging in the village, they do not impact the infrastructure. They use my water, which I buy from the village. They use my electric, which I buy from the village at very high cost. They use my parking lot. The burden comes from the other 95%. So you're not taxing them. You're taxing our guests and my customers, and you're taxing the people that are contributing the most to the village. So it's not a really fair thing.
Okay.
I have an Airbnb bedroom, and I made a mistake and thought I had blocked a date, and then I double booked. And I was very appreciative that I could I paid personally for a room for my guests at your hotel, and I was totally happy to pay our 3% plus the 10% of the other tax. And I know that the guests loved staying there, and we had breakfast the next day, and there is a value for people to be able to spend the night, to be able to spend a full 24 hours in the village. There's a huge value for people to be able to do that, as opposed to come in for, a couple hours or something. And I know that, Jim, you're apparently going to keep on working on this, but I think it's a lost cause. And people, but you have a great hotel. Yeah, it's a compliment on the hotel and saying that I don't think it's going to work to keep opposing the lodging tax.
Don't tell us it's a loss, because that's not nice.
Okay, let's move on to, we're going to talk briefly about next steps for village parking.
Yeah. So last month, there was a proposal, which didn't go anywhere, about parking at Beta Hughes Park, and I felt like, okay, let's back up and look at this again. So I had email with Karen Wintrow, who sent me this presentation, which council has seen, which talks about downtown parking myths, realities, and solutions. And also, she sent me a report that was done in 2004, council had created with the village manager a subcommittee of 5 people that looked at parking and made recommendations, and I'm not sure that much was done with that. Then the chamber had a meeting in 2010 with a few people. And so my sense is that, one, I don't think parking in Yellow Springs is a crisis. I don't think this is a crisis situation. Yes, it's been something that's been talked about for decades, but I don't think it's a crisis. I also think that we can get low-hanging fruit. For example, what Johnny's doing right now at the Bryan Center. I think if we're going to treat parking as a serious issue, then it does make sense to look at what are the problems. For example, I think we can agree that the grocery store, for example, probably gets parking. I'm sure people park there who aren't going to the grocery store. So there are particular instances that might be a problem, but I think that we need to understand if there's a problem, what it is, and then look at the easy things to do. And that's what this study, I think, shows that, for example, you don't have to have parking right in front of the store where you're going to go. Also, at least one of the proposals for the comp plan included parking.
Several of them.
Several of them did. So I just think that if we want to do something about parking, we need to step back, decide what the problem is, and maybe we want to wait and incorporate it into the comp plan as that gets revised. Also, the issue of paying for parking, as opposed to donation, but paying, is a separate issue. And I think if we're going to do that, we need to think about how that's going to be, not just put a proposal out there. I think we need to sort of think about it ahead of time. So that's basically all I was going to say.
Okay. So I guess following up on that, one of the things, and it's actually on the agenda for June 17th, so we can talk about this a little bit more then. We did include in our 2019 actions that we would create a plan for paid parking. I want to be very direct about why I'm pursuing this, and it's related to the lodging tax. The lodging tax exceeded our expectations. Nobody believed that we were even gonna generate more than 40,000 off the lodging tax, and we generated over 53,000. And ultimately, that's gonna help us, complete sidewalk projects, fix infrastructure, all the things that we know we need to do. I feel confident, because I said we'd make over 40,000 on the lodging tax. I believe that we could generate over 100,000 a year in paid parking, given the amount of traffic that we see in our town. And I also, because of all the traveling I do for my work, every community, just like lodging tax, paid parking, right? If you want to park in front of downtown businesses, and that supports business as well, then that's mentioned here because of that churn, so people don't stay there all day. It's a real benefit, and it's part of what communities do that I think makes a lot of sense. So all that being said, I would like to continue to keep that on our 2019 actions. And I do like the idea of doing a parking study, which is what, Karen suggested. I think you mentioned that as well. I would suggest that we use some of our economic development fund dollars to do that, and really find out how to make this work. I do know that there have been at least 2 initiatives in the past where a parking committee was put together. They tried to solve the problem with people using TOMs and that sort of thing. And they came up with results, but then a lot of things, it just went on the shelf.
Yeah, that's the 2004 report, which I have. I can
Okay.
send it to, Karen sent it to me.
Right. But I guess, my thought is that on June 17th, when we review our status of our 2019 goals, I would like that to be one of the things that we, as a council, make a decision on. Are we going to move forward with exploring this or not? So I think, we understand like what the issues are. I'm not sure if anyone's ever said it was a crisis. If I said it was a crisis, for example, then, I will retract that.
I didn't say anyone did.
Okay,
was
I just didn't, because it's just come up a
framing
lot.
it as-
Okay, it's just come up a lot, because I know, like, I did say affordable housing was a crisis. And, Steve Kahn had his letter to the editor about that. But to me, the paid parking thing is an opportunity. And that's the way I want us to look at it. But I also think, and Lisa's highlighted this before, we need to prioritize our residents in thinking about solutions. We need to think about, not just Tom's parking lot, but also the parking behind King's, King's Alley and all that. I think there are some interesting things that we could look at. But I also understand if after deliberation, we decide to take that off our priority list. But that would be my recommendation, is that we have that be part of our discussion on the 17th. So, but at the end of the day, I'm starting to think we don't have many more revenue-generating options left. That's the one, to me, that seems like the most possible. And I keep on thinking about the list that Johnny's given to us, and despite what, one person thinks, we are gonna really have difficulty in tackling all this infrastructure stuff moving forward, right? I mean, Colleen's told us that we're gonna go in the red.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen, so.
So, can I just,
Yes.
I just want to be clear on something that you said.
Yes.
Because you said that you wanted to use some of the economic development money to do a parking study.
Yeah.
So you don't want to wait on the comprehensive plan that will include parking?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, so, right. I mean, that's a good point that you've mentioned before. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so the comprehensive plan update that we put out an RFP for, and we got 6 responses, I think. And those responses address parking as something that they will look at during the update of the comprehensive plan. And so that comprehensive plan is going to cover the village. So if, my thought was, and I think Judy agrees with me, that if we're already paying to have the comprehensive plan updated and it's including parking, let's let them do that. And if in fact we want them to take a deeper dive into the parking, then they are expected to, then perhaps you add a little bit or something. I don't, we could figure that out. But it's already included in the responses that we got to the RFP. So to me, it makes sense to just wait and see what you get from that, because you don't want to spend the money twice on parking.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think at least coordinate with it.
Yep. Yep. Cool. I also want to say, because I mentioned it to everybody I've seen that was at the last meeting, that I thought that discussion around Beatty Hughes Park was exactly what we want to happen in council meetings. Very respectful, very civil, very informative, and I really appreciated it. Maybe the proposal could have come forward in a different way, but I think the discussion that we had was really productive, and I took a lot away from that, so.
It was, and it reminds me that I think that that park could be enhanced.
Yes,
And that might be something that could be part of participatory budgeting
exactly.
yep,
is ideas for enhancing that park.
definitely. Cool. All right, on to new business. Mary Ann, you're gonna,
Yeah,
Tell us
okay,
about the
so
community
Lisa and I can do this, I'll
Okay.
start off. So we had, I think, maybe exactly 50 people who came to the forum on policing, which was called A New Approach, an Appreciative Inquiry to Build Collaborative Policing. And the approach was that first people looked at what were some positive encounters that citizens had had with our police. And so the officers who attended, which was a night, there were a number of police officers that attended, looked at an instance where they had a positive experience with a resident. That was the first part. The second part was looking into the future. What would we want the police department to be? So there were a lot of responses to that, and we have a tally that I did, and I haven't sent that out to council because I wanted the rest of our team to look at it. We hadn't done that. But at any rate, I think overwhelmingly, I'll just read the first sentence here. If the desires of the 50 people attending the meeting are a reflection of the village as a whole, we think it is safe to say that Yellow Springs wants a police department that is proactively integrated into the community and is a source of assistance and expertise. And then a term that was used earlier in discussing the police department was police department as guardians as opposed to warriors. So those themes were the things that came up primarily in terms of the forum. Now, we have some recommendations moving forward. One is, does it make sense to test the results of that with a broader discussion, do a Survey Monkey? So that's a question we could do. There'd be only a short time during which people could respond. Then another is to look at the police guidelines, which I think pretty much the guidelines support that, what people are saying they want. And so then that leads to, does there need to be new recruitment material so that people who are applying to be a police officer here understand what we want, and training to go along with that? Then the other thing is, people want the police officers to be nice and caring and et cetera, but the community doesn't understand also the restrictions that the police officers have, what has to happen internally, and of course, we want the officers to be able to handle violent and crime situations when they occur too. So that's sort of the content from the forum. We were also looking at, does that process work? How well did that process work? Because we didn't ask people to say, what don't you like? I mean, that's usually people like to talk about the problems. This is like flipping it around. What works well, and how can we enhance what works well? So we are trying to think, could we enhance that process and use that same process in other situations as we move forward? I mean, I'm looking at this also as, I think we want to be increasing the way our citizens can interact with government decisions. So it seems like looking at this process as an option for when we have inquiries into things that the government needs to do. And then the last thing, we were just sort of looking at what could have enhanced it. For example, we did not do good on outreach. And that, I think that people we anticipated 100 people. We got about half. Now, people tend to come when there's a crisis, and there wasn't a crisis. But I think also we just sort of dropped the ball on outreach. I think I'll stop and let you.
I think the only thing that I would also want to highlight is this clear theme about localism, and, the idea that the sworn officers of the Yellow Springs Police Department should live locally. And after listening to all of the comments, and we also collected cards that people wrote in, I began to wonder if what the real issue isn't that they have a 45387 zip code, as much as it is that they have a true understanding of the community, that they have relationships with a lot of members in the community, that they truly understand who they're, they know us. They know us as individuals. They know who lives here, they know who doesn't live here, they know what's up with them. And I don't know if that requires that they live in a house or an apartment in the village. And if it does, then, I think as a council, we have to think about making that happen. But I guess I just am not convinced that it isn't more of a way of being rather than where you sleep at night. And I would really like to explore that more, particularly given the shortage of housing and, and all of that. So that's something that I've really been thinking about a lot. And I don't know the answer to that.
But I think during our conversation the other day with Bob Wasserman regarding the forum, did he not say that they were planning on addressing that in some way?
They are. And I think that's something that we knew as part of the police assessment that we wanted to have a community forum. But I do think that it's very important, as we look at all of these things, the goals for the police department, how we act on the forum, that we all tie these things together when the assessment is done. And I think that Bob Wasserman even, asked us and said, this is great, but, you're having this assessment for a reason, so let these things converge. Right? So, but I mean, I'm just thinking a lot about what does it mean to be local?
Yep. One thing I do want to mention in terms of outreach, and then if there are any comments from citizens, is, and I kind of referenced this before, but we need to remember that our Facebook page gets a fair amount of traction, but it's the Facebook groups like Bulletin Board, the one that's, nice, and you just like inform people about events. That hits like 1,400 people. So that's kind of an easy thing that we can do, which is share those events onto, those Facebook groups, which we don't always do.
Yeah, that's why I thought that it would be good to have a standard protocol for
Yep.
whenever we do some event, that we know who, we get, ideally, get the information together and have I don't know if it makes sense to have the clerk do, or the village manager, and also then there's how to make an announcement that's effective. Like the utility roundup flyer, that was very, very good, or the shred it, but what happened with ours is it
wasn't eye-catching.
It was not eye-catching, and so it had this word, appreciative inquiry, who knows what that means. The date, I think, was real small, so there was a lot that could have been done, but if we have someone on staff who can, or volunteer, who's good at doing that, that would be helpful.
Right, I was also I looked over at Sean because, a lot of times the way we package something for Channel 5, could become like an image that we use in an ad or something. So, yeah, I think that's another resource we might be able to tap into. Awesome. Did anyone have any comments about the policing forum before we move on? Okay. All right, so we added two things to new business. Mary Ann, you wanted to talk about H2 Ohio?
Yes, what happened was that I saw a post regarding this community CELDIF, whatever that, Community Education Development Legal Fund, this organization that does Community Bill of Rights. And I think it was Toledo had passed a Bill of Rights for Lake Erie. And the state is like saying, no, you can't do that. Lake Erie has no rights. So when I happened to see the governor at the Tecumseh Land Trust meeting, I was talking to him about it, and he said that he had a proposal that apparently the House did not fund, called H2O, for Lake Erie and for clean water in Ohio. And I think that I want to find out more information about that, and I would like to have a resolution from council
Cool.
to our representatives. and
So
senators.
the Ohio Environmental Council
Uh-huh.
is strongly advocating for H2 Ohio. And I know Heather, their executive director. In fact, we met a couple weeks ago and talked about this initiative. So, yeah, so maybe I'll connect you guys.
Okay, yeah,
And
thank
then I love the idea of advocating for that. It's a really great initiative. And again, it's about protecting Lake Erie, but it's also about clean water for all Ohioans. Especially children at risk, for example. So, cool. Okay. And then Lisa, you wanted to talk about emergency preparedness?
Yeah, it's hard not to be thinking about emergency preparedness this last week, given that storm that hit our community, and didn't hit our community, but has had such a profound effect on the Dayton area. And that struck as I've continued to progress with the Yellow Springs Health Assessment, which also touches on, the issues of health and safety. And, I realized that, then there's this other side, other than catastrophic weather events, but I've also been very saddened by the shootings in Virginia in a village office, municipal offices. And that's another dimension of emergency preparedness and this very unpredictable culture that we're living in. So I know enough, I guess, to know that emergency preparedness in Yellow Springs gets involved with, fire and rescue too. And our PD. But, I wanted to bring this up tonight, particularly in light of, those two things, both a catastrophic weather event and a catastrophic action of a shooter, to say that I would like to make this a priority for our new village manager, to understand what all is our emergency preparedness readiness in Yellow Springs. And I say that without criticism. I'm sure there's going to be lots of gaps. Without criticism, because anytime you do a gap analysis of anything important, the idea is to find the gaps. And I would like us to know where the gaps are, and I think it should be a priority for our community, not only for us to have really good collaboration with fire and rescue, our police department, our government, our business owners, but I also think that we should make it, I would like to commit myself to being certain that every member of the community knows what the emergency preparedness capacity and readiness is of the village, and that they begin to feel like they have a plan too, and that we as a council and as village government are doing all that we can to help everyone have a plan. I lived for most of my life in places with earthquakes. Got to have a plan. People have stuff set aside. Wind is a whole new thing. Well, but, I just think it's really important. And so I would like to put that on our radar going forward.
And Lisa, I don't disagree with you. I think that it's important that not only do we know what's going on, but our community knows what's going on. And I know that Johnny and his crews have some plans and preparedness. I also know that this building was packed the night of the hail and high winds.
Yeah, I mean, and that's great, and I'm sure we do have a plan, right? We have plans, different entities have plans. So I'm trying to think of
We
a
do.
comprehensive
but-
thing.
But let me go, we're right there on, everybody's on the same playing field. 1 week prior to that storm, Chief Carlson come up. Actually, Dave Meister is setting it all up with the fire department, Public Works. We're all gonna get our heads together on how to go forward with all of the emergency plans, who's the point of contact, what everybody thinks they need, what we need here. Because until it happens, you think you got the best plan. But Dave was a common person to be able to go from the police department to the fire department, also to be with Public Works. So I like it that you brought it together, because the 12 that was killed in Virginia, a lot of people don't understand. That's the reason why we put a window in, is because we don't know. We don't want somebody coming in and taking it out, taking frustration out on the staff. So we put that window in where people can check in. That was one of the plans that we started a while back with the emergency plan. So we're constantly thinking, yeah, and it's sad to say, we got to think of active shooters, because you don't know.
Right,
So
Right.
I just want to let you know that we have got the ball started,
that's great.
but unfortunately, we had that big tornado. And at the same time, like Patty said, staff, Ben and myself was on the phone with dispatch the whole entire time. I had my radio on. Luckily, we didn't get a flicker of a light.
Well,
All I heard
amazing,
was,
right?
is
Amazing.
when I called the dispatch, they said we have dogs, cats, chickens, and birds, and a bunch of people in the building. And that was fine, because we had power here. One thing that I can say that we have is we have generators on all of our public facilities except for Public Works. But for the lift station, the wastewater treatment plant, the water plant, and the Bryant Center. So we don't lose power when power does go out.
Right, and I really, thank you, and I don't want to suggest for a minute that I was saying that we don't have plans.
No, but they are
but
outdated.
It's time, I think.
It is time to update.
Right. And I mean, really, the water situation in Dayton has really made me think a lot about if our water plant was decimated.
Right.
Ben and I went to a technical training, and they have a blue and red game they play. And so red will actually pull up a map, and they'll figure out where a trouble spot is. And it's blue's job to figure out how to bypass all that. And we're getting ready to do that with water, with sewer, with electric, as just like a scenario. You just bring in a map, lay it out, blue goes outside, does something, then red comes in and marks it out. So it's just an ongoing training process, and it's got to be second nature.
Well, as this evolves, can we think about how to keep the council up to date?
Absolutely.
And then how to be really intentional with community education?
And I think one thing that I would like to see included in the plan, I realize I'm not going to be here by the time it all comes together, but this building is not technically an overnight shelter, because we have some shortcomings of the building itself that we cannot get it approved by the Red Cross as an overnight shelter. And I think those need to be looked at just in case there is a need
Right.
to house folks overnight,
Right.
as opposed to just a couple of hours.
I do want to address one thing that we've seen on Facebook is all the tornado sirens are tested monthly.
Yes.
First Monday of the month, except for this morning. They did not go off at noon, so we may put out a notice to where we're going to test them later in the week. We've got to figure that out.
Right.
New dispatcher, we dropped the ball on that. But they are tested monthly. They are tested, or done a maintenance test on them yearly. Battery backups are tested on the two, I think every 6 months. So we have, Key Sally is slated to be replaced next year with a new rotating siren. Right now, it is just a cluster up there that blows
Yeah,
hot air.
and Megan had emailed me, I think, and asked me a question about the sirens. And, there's a siren that's relatively close to my house, but if my windows are closed, I can't hear it. So if you get an alert on your phone that severe weather is coming, open your window and see if you can hear the siren, because I immediately walked over to my window, opened it, heard the siren, and down to the basement, we started hauling cats. So, you may not hear it if your windows are closed. If you've got your furnace on or you've got your air conditioning on, maybe you have a fan that's loud and it's really close to you. Could be a lot of reasons you don't hear it over the wind, but open your window just a crack and you'll hear it. You will hear it.
Colin had a great article, and I don't know if you've seen it, but tornado sirens are only meant for outside, to make you get inside. They're not designed to go through all your
Yes, I saw
house
that
and
post
windows and
from,
all
yeah,
that.
Chief Olney.
So that was a great article, but, and like Patty said, if you call the office and you get put on the hyper reach, I got 3 calls that night on my village phone saying, take cover,
Right.
tornado in
Yeah,
area.
and you
And
can-
you can be added to that
Yeah.
list, and Greene County has access to that list.
You
as
can
well.
get alerts on your phone from the National Weather Service. There are all kinds of, that's what everyone should do. If you have a cell phone, sign up for alerts from the Weather Service. If you have a landline, sign up on the HyperReach. Make sure.
HyperReach is well as cell phones. Whatever phone you carry,
Right.
call the ladies downstairs, they can put you on that list, and if the village has a power outage or we have something that we need to get out there, they can hit that and it'll go straight to you.
Right.
Well, it occurs to me, that's like a good short-term thing we could do is, schedule for like an upcoming utility bill to remind people to get on
Yes.
HyperReach.
Great.
So, yeah,
Thank you
thanks,
very
Johnny.
much.
And Lisa, I think that's really great to bring that up. I also agree that we want to look at, where are some other gaps that we could fill?
Were there really chickens?
There were really chickens.
Oh.
Chickens, I had my neighbor over in my basement with her dog and my cats, and that was interesting. So,
I understand it.
Okay, Patty,
Got
manager's
stretched
report.
just a couple of, touching on a couple of things. As I said, the census is coming, and if you, it is really important to get that complete count. But also, if you are looking for a job, there is a typo in my link that is there in my, it's census with a S-U-S as opposed to S-Y-S. So if you want to go to 2020census.gov/jobs, there's an entire listing there. I want to make sure that council knows we'll be bringing 2 pieces of legislation to the June 17th meeting. One is the renewal of our contract with Moveca. It seems like June is the month for contracts to expire. Moveca would like to renew the contract as well with a $65 per month decrease in the cost. Thank you, Moveca. So I will be bringing that to the next council meeting. And in addition, I'm going to be bringing a mutual aid agreement that allows our electric crew to assist other AMP and APA communities. Now, we can go out and help DP&L right now, but in order to assist other AMP and APA communities, we have to have this, this agreement. It's strictly a mutual aid agreement, and you will see in it, how they pay for our people to go and help them, okay? And they actually pay double time for our crews to go help. And in addition to that, they pay for the equipment that we may or may not send along, so the truck or whatever. We'll have that in the next one. It is important that we get that passed so that we can start helping out these other communities, or they can come and help us if the need be. Johnny, did you want to say anything else about that? That said, there is one thing, our crew did get a call to go assist DP&L. They did get disregarded before they got there, but we can go and help DP&L now, and our crew was ready to do that. So they were headed out of the village when they got disregarded. So there is a lot of cooperation amongst the entities to get their electric restored as quickly as possible, and we always stand ready to help. other communities. So the alternative summer schedules have been in effect this is the second week. Things seem to be going well as people kind of adjust a little bit to those extended hours. But they seem to be working out well, so we'll keep you posted.
Good. Judy?
Nothing much, other than our new employees working out quite well so far, and the pool is fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah, nice
everybody.
pictures.
Yeah, thanks for the pictures.
Yeah, I also, your comment about our youth being genetically unable to walk on concrete made me laugh out loud. So I'm still kind of
it's
thinking,
quite
processing that. Okay, future agenda items.
Oh, we got a lot.
We do. So I think everyone knows Josue will be here on June 17th. And, yeah, I think if anything, we're gonna need to figure out how to manage the next agenda. So, but I do wanna say, I think it's really important that we do that mid-year goals review.
Yes, I do too, and I'd like to take some time with it and perhaps we would decide that we would have a work session.
Yes, yes, and I already did a stab at the color coding like we've done in the past.
Oh.
So I've got, Judy already has it, so she can share it. I've already got a green, yellow, red thing.
I don't think that we have time to get into participatory budgeting as well as the community health update and the housing board
Yep,
and everything else that we have on the Justice System Commission.
yeah, let's move that forward.
So what, you want participatory budgeting moving?
Go ahead and move it to July 1st, and then we'll see
Okay.
how we do.
I also had, so you get the second reading of 2019-15 with pool rates. I put emergency preparedness / readiness, maybe July 1, to give Josue time to start getting his head in that. Does that sound reasonable?
Oh, I don't think that's enough time, because there's a lot to cover on that one.
When are we going to have the assessment, the YSPD assessment?
Bob told me that the end of the month.
Okay, so that would be July 1, I
Yes.
guess, too?
You also need a discussion on bidirectional metering. You had said June 17. Is that when you want that?
Well, I think those two things, let's have them in the manager's report, and then, see what we need to do with that.
And,
I mean, if somebody wants to pull it off into a discussion item, then we can.
okay, and then did you want, you had wanted more information on board and commission kind of expectations with regard to the way the interviews are done, that, all of that kind of information generally. Do you want that to move up to the July meeting, or you want it for the 17th?
It can wait till July 1st, I guess.
What about the justice system? I'm wondering if it makes sense to have the assessment before the justice system, just because I'm wondering whether there are things in the assessment that'll be given to the justice system.
Well,
It's a very high-level update. I mean,
Right.
we just want to make sure that you know what we're doing
Okay.
towards the formation of the Justice System Commission, but there's no one, appointed yet or anything, right? I mean,
Yeah,
what you're-
it's just
what
mainly
you're
going to be
thinking.
just,
well, because I guess the other thing is if we're putting a call out for, members, then, yeah, that needs to happen
Right, we need to
ASAP.
get
and-
it moving.
Yep, so I definitely want to leave that there. Okay, anything else? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.